It is some kind of hot down here in Louisiana right now. Let me tell you a little story though. My dad was a commercial fisherman, and so was I for a while, on and off, between military and other things. But the oil field finally came a-calling like it does everybody else down here. But I asked him one time, I said, Dad, what's the best outboard motor? I'm looking to buy an outboard motor. And he said, well, I'll tell you what you do. You go down to the levee being Bayou Benoit. You guys that know this area probably know where that's at. It's in access to the Chapel Basin. And it was a landing at the time that all the commercial fishermen would come into, including us. So I went down and did a count. He told me, go down and get a count of all the outboard motors and which ones, look at which one's the most popular. Evinrude, Johnson, or Mercury at that time. And they might have been a few other outliers, but they didn't have any Yamahas, Suzukis, and none of that stuff back then. And I did my count, and it was unanimous Mercuries. So that's what I bought, and that little motor ran and ran and ran and ran, and I hauled a many a catfish with that thing over the years. I owned that thing for probably 20 years. But anyway, I got to thinking about that when you start talking about which truck is the most popular and which one in terms of commercial use, you know, a work truck. And I started noticing here, over a year ago, I started noticing mostly back and forth between my trips to Houston. And it came down to the Rams. But you go down I-10 or anywhere really, one of these loading docks offshore where these trucks are waiting to offload and that sort of thing. And you'll see, by and large, Rams pulling gooseneck trailers, loaded to the gill, work trucks, 3500s mostly. And because you know they got that tongue weight. So anyway, the question comes up, well, why are they so popular? What makes a Ram more popular? Is it just the name Cummins engine? Well, I don't think so. There's more to it than that. Ford and Chevy's got a good engine. The key is the 6 is balanced, whereas the V8s and V6s, any V 90 degree, most of them are 90 degree offset, it takes a lot of counterweight to get these engine balanced. So they never run as smooth, is what I'm saying, as an inline 6. It gets better fuel economy. It doesn't take as much room in the compartment other than length. If you think your Ram has got a lot of stuff in it, raise the hood on a Power Stroke or a Duramax. Man, that is really something. All the 18-wheelers that I know about anyway are all inline 6s. Peterbilt, Mack, International, GM, regardless of what they put in these trucks, it's an inline 6. It's much easier to work on those engines than it is on a V. You know, a V is very hard to access certain things. So that's a big thing to mechanics, I can tell you that. The i6 inline 6 develops its torque at a lower RPM generally, and that's because they longer stroke. They've got what they call square, over square, and under square. Well, a Cummins is under square. In other words, the stroke is longer than the diameter of the cylinder. Most diesels are over square, but when you start getting to the V's, they're getting close to being square. But that's an important point, because when you say, well, why is that? Well, if you think of a torque wrench or any wrench, and you're pulling on something, trying to tighten it, the longer the wrench, the more torque you're able to apply, right? You know, in foot-pounds. And so that's the same thing if you look at a cylinder crankshaft. It's kind of the same thing, because it's like that connecting rod is your wrench, and the shaft, the crankshaft, is what you're trying to not tighten, but you're turning it. So it's the same principle though in terms of the length of the stroke. You have more length, so you have more torque. The Cummins runs at a lower speed and develops its torque at a lower speed. Now, my perception of the Cummins and what I've seen over the years with these engines and being around them, working on them, all of these things, the trucks that I've had, it seems as though Cummins has a philosophy: keep it simple, stupid. You know, the KISS method. They're not stupid though. But you know, the I6 is much simpler. There's less moving parts, fewer valves, fewer connecting rods, the whole bit. It's just simpler, less drag. They, as I mentioned, they're doing with a 6, whereas it takes an 8 to do the same thing, because the 8 is just not as efficient. And speaking of the KISS method, yeah, the turbocharger is the same way. It's simple. It's got one moving part, the nozzle, that slides back and forth. Now on the VGTs you do have the actuator, but you don't have all those little vanes that you do on the Garretts and the other manufacturers. As far as I know, Holset is the only ones that have that sliding sleeve. So it's less prone to issues. With the EGR valve, you know, recirculating this EGR gas, these turbochargers would tend to start getting carboned up, especially with these little vanes. You can look them up on the internet and stuff, and see people tearing them down and stuff. And those little veins are just completely seized up, you know, full of carbon. When you ram, throw your exhaust brake on every once in a while and slide that nozzle all the way. I pretty much run mine all the time. Don't have it on right now, but here you go. I leave it on. I don't see any downside to leaving it on. I see the benefit that it's going to keep wiping that any carbon that could accumulate. These newer trucks though, like this is a 4th generation, and from 2013 on up, they don't have nearly as much EGR as the pre-2013s. And before they started using the DEF fluid, a lot of people complain about the DEF fluid, but with DEF you don't have to recycle as much gas, exhaust gas. So DEF is a benefit. I know it's, you know, adds cost and all of those things, but as far as engine longevity, it's a benefit. But anyway, that's kind of my story on that. Not trying to start any wars between the different diesels. I think they're all good. I just prefer the Cummins because of some of the things that I mentioned here. I appreciate you guys watching my video, and until next time, adios.